I love that I can help people perform and be the best version of themselves in their sport.
Just how important fuel is and how often we underestimate how much fuel we need to adequately live with the demands of day-to-day tasks.
Not being so hard on yourself that you're not putting that perfect meal into your body every single time, because again, that's not reality. That's not how our life works now.
Welcome to 40G.
Dr Emily Meehan, welcome to the 40G podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm extremely excited for this episode because I think every female athlete can attest that at some stage in their career, they've wondered how much they should be fueling, what they should be consuming to optimize their performance, but also to optimize their well-being. So I think we're going to get a few golden nuggets today, which is really going to help the audience.
I hope so.
Now, you have had an extensive career working with a range of elite athletes from Olympians, Paralympians, AFLW, Collingwood, AFL, golf, soccer, just about everything.
Close.
So I'm really interested to know the differences between athletes and their sporting demands and how they can sort of fuel in a way that's going to optimize them for their individual performance. Yeah. So again, we'll get into that, but we're mixing the structure up a little bit this week and I want to get into some Mythbusters around fueling. So I'm going to say a statement. You tell me if it is a myth or a fact and then briefly tell me why. And we can dig a bit deeper into it throughout the episode.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
Okay. Statement number 1, carbs make you fat.
Myth. Absolute myth. It's like there's such a, oh my gosh, carbs have just been demonized. Poor carbs.
They have. I love carbs.
They're just so important for us and they don't make us fat. Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. No. We're going to dive into that properly later. Absolutely will.
All right. Number 2, if you are lighter, you are faster. So dropping weight boosts performance.
Oh. Oh gosh, this one's, I can't, look, from a physiological perspective and performance perspective, there are sports where if you do drop weight, it can be helpful. But there are so many sports that don't require this and I think take the approach or that sort of justification and it doesn't work for them.
Right.
Now, I think, yes, you can do it, but it needs to be done in a safe, supported way at the right time. And often I see athletes who will come to me in a place where they're already in a deficit of energy and will want to drop weight and it's just not the right time for them. And they're trying to do it in the wrong way. I think there are sports that it will benefit, but the majority won't.
Yes. And in a, as you say, like supervised, correct manner in doing that.
Exactly. With the right people.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Statement number 3, women need different nutrition strategies than men.
Yes. We're not the same as men, but the science isn't there yet to support what that exactly looks like because the science hasn't been done in women to date. Not enough.
Yeah, okay.
Now, I know that we always get the question around, do we change our nutrition with our menstrual cycle? That's also not there yet. We don't have the evidence to support a change in nutrition to support menstrual cycle.
Interesting.
But we are all individuals, men and women, and so we are all different for our requirements.
And are there studies being done at the moment to try and prove that for women? Yeah.
Oh, look, the menstrual cycle is really complicated and it is more tricky to do studies around that. But so far to date, the science suggests no, we don't need to change it.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Statement number 4, REDS only affects elite athletes.
False. Absolutely false. No, there's so many, you don't have to be an elite athlete to be under eating or under fueling. And I would say that the majority of the amateur athletic population, adolescent population, your weekend warriors are probably under fueling.
Right. And I guess another point to add there is that you also can be a male athlete and have REDS. It's not just women.
Yes, and I see it so often in men, and I think it's also, look, I know obviously this is a podcast for women and I'm all for it, but we do probably turn a blind eye to what happens in males. But that's, again, a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, and we'll get you back for that one.
Yeah.
Episode number 2. And the last one is that the best athletes are the most disciplined with food.
False. Yeah, I don't think that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
I think athletes, particularly elite athletes who have those perfectionistic traits,
yes.
which you often see, and that is great, and that's often what makes athletes successful. But I think that you don't have to have, 100% like dialed in nutrition to be successful.
Yeah.
I'm very much the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
I think that, there's performance and you need to, dial nutrition in around certain times. But, we're also human and, we need to live our lives and also appreciate food and nutrition for what it is. Yeah. And it brings us together socially and culturally. And, I think we can't deny that of people. So, yeah, I think we definitely, 80-20 rule all the way.
Yeah. So all about balance.
All about balance.
Yeah. Beautiful.
People think that's so boring. All about balance. But yes, it's
very true.
It's so
in
true.
So many aspects,
we just have to come back to the basics.
Yeah. I agree. All right. Now let's get into a bit of a background about yourself. So what was sport like for you growing up, and what sort of life lessons did you learn that you still carry with you today in your professional career and all other aspects of life?
Oh, look, I was always a good athlete, but not a great one. I was never going to be an elite athlete, on the world stage. But I loved playing sport and I was always given the opportunity to do so, which was great. I was never told no, and I loved doing that. But then the human side of me, like outside of sport, I was just like anyone else, and my body was changing, and I noticed it was different to my friends, and I was bigger than everybody else. And then I started to try and change my nutrition. So I've always had that sort of interest in nutrition, but interest in sport. And when I figured out that I could put those two together and help people, which I also wanted to do, I think that's what brought me to what I do today.
Yep.
And I'm so glad, the trifecta, and I love that I can help people perform and be the best version of themselves in their sport. And in their life as well, from a nutrition perspective.
Yeah. So when you say that you sort of saw yourself and you felt bigger than other people, what were you doing then in order to sort of counterbalance that? Did you have some poor nutritional habits that eventually made you realise that there is such a big issue here?
Yeah. Look, I remember I did Weight Watchers. I think I was maybe 14. And that's because I begged my mum to take me so I could lose weight.
Yeah.
And so that was the points counting. I never did anything too drastic, but I didn't have that nutrition knowledge, and we didn't learn about that at school. And so my nutrition was so up and down. I yo-yoed. I tried all the diets. And, that was all part of it and all part of the learning to get me to where I am now, knowing what works and what doesn't. So it's even worse now. I didn't grow up with social media. Yeah. So it wasn't always in my face. Yeah. There is so much information out there. No wonder people are confused. Like, what information do you take when it's constantly in your face?
That's right. It's analysis paralysis, and there's just a fatigue around what is right and what's wrong.
Absolutely. And I think we see all this information thrown at us constantly, and then we don't necessarily listen to our bodies. And, someone says, do this, and it's like, okay, well, that must work. Yeah. But again, it might have worked for them, but it doesn't necessarily work for you. And so I think it's really tricky to figure out what's right and what's wrong now.
Yeah. And how do you think, for a young athlete today listening to this, how do you understand what works for you? Do you need to come and see someone like yourself to better understand your body and how it works and what demands you have to meet those, but also just have enough fuel for your hormones, your day-to-day life activities and everything else?
Look, I think seeing a dietitian is really helpful, but not all of us have that opportunity to do so. There are great resources out there. So, the AIS, or the Australian Institute of Sport, have some great free resources that people can access. There's one called the AIS Performance Health Initiative. I think that's
right. We'll go with that.
Link in the show notes. Let's go with that.
Show notes. Yeah.
But there's free modules there where you can learn about nutrition, breast health, all things female. And it's such great information that can help you start that journey of what the right information is.
Yes.
For you as an athlete and a young athlete.
Yeah. And you only have to think, like, if you're a young athlete and you're learning the right information from the start, like, God, you're miles ahead of what all of us are, who have had the wrong information, who have trialed everything, who have done the fad diets, and it just has never worked. So it would be so beneficial from a young age to have that.
Yeah. And I think, look, there are lots of opportunities now where dietitians are doing talks in schools, and there is nutrition included in the curriculum, which I think is really helpful. But I think it's also really important to recognize that, as athletes, you can maybe hear that information, but then you're also human, and you might be at school or around your peers, and what they're saying and doing can also influence what you're doing, which is a really strong pull. And, I think I see this a lot with young athletes who are still at school, is that, within their sporting environment, they're probably quite happy with what they're doing from a nutritional standpoint, what their body looks like, but then they're back in their peer group at school and they're doing things that are quite different. So it's that pull and that judgment potentially that they might be seeing in that different environment that would be really tricky for young women to deal with.
Yeah. And I guess not even friends, but if you're an athlete and you're trying to fuel yourself correctly, but you live at home with parents who don't take nutrition that seriously, it's, as you say, it's a big social, cultural construct food. So it's quite hard to, I guess, break free from that. And I've sort of experienced that myself. Like, my parents are sort of in the country, they're veg and, meat, but in terms of, like, there's lots of cakes, biscuits and all that, which is great. But if I go home, I sort of fall into that trap a bit as well. So it's quite hard to, it's almost, you feel a little bit isolated if you yourself are trying to have a strict diet, or not a strict diet, but a well-balanced diet to fuel your performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, like, your parents are going to be your biggest influencers, right, on your nutrition, because they're the main grocery buyers. So if they're bringing certain types of foods into the home or not bringing them in, or they have their own beliefs because maybe they were athletes once too, or they have their own diet beliefs, then that can be really tricky. Yeah. So for any young woman navigating that, and there are many athletes that I work with that are navigating that, it's, you're getting it from all angles.
Yeah.
So it can be hard to, like, what do I do and how do I do this well?
Yeah. And this might be a little contentious point, but I've been doing my Cert 3 and 4 in fitness, and the Australian dietary guidelines, I've been reading those, and they just seem to me so outdated, or not enough emphasis on protein and things like that. What are your thoughts on the dietary guidelines? Do they need updating, or are they quite correct?
Look, there are elements of it that are absolutely true, and that we need to eat more vegetables. So they recommend that we have 5 serves of veggies a day. The majority of Australians have 1.
Yeah.
So I find it so funny how we all go, okay, we're going to remove these entire food groups because this is, that's going to make me better or healthier or whatever that might look like. Yet we're still not meeting our vegetable nutrition guideline. Which is something so simple. Yeah. I think from a protein perspective, I think, again, the guidelines are there. We tend to overeat things like meat. Don't eat meat. I do think you need to include meat and chicken and fish and lean proteins in the diet, if that's part of your cultural beliefs. But we overeat them. Right. So, like a serve of red meat is 80 grams. And we're eating probably 150 plus every time.
Tuesday steak night.
Yeah. So it's, but then we go and remove entire food groups because we think it's better for us. But if we just ate to the required portions that the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating recommends, then we'd probably a bit more, that would be a bit more helpful for us.
Yes.
Then the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, it doesn't necessarily recommend what you need as an athlete.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So you need to then add additional food in to support your athletic requirements and what that looks like.
Right.
So
yeah. So I guess, it is just for your sort of general population, but you need more sport specific nutrition if you are
exactly
an athlete,
which we have recommendations for.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. So let's dive now deeper into some hot topics at the moment around nutrition. And that is REDs and low energy availability. So I guess, first of all, what are they and how prevalent are they in your job?
Okay. So REDs, so relative energy deficiency in sport, is underpinned by something called low energy availability. So if we take a look at it, we've got to think about our physiology, and I'll try and make this as simple as possible. We all have a daily energy requirement, okay? Just to sit and breathe, we require energy. Now we can refer to that as your resting metabolic rate or your basal metabolic rate. And we need to provide that energy through food. And that's just, and that can range from everybody, for everybody. It's different, okay, generally based on body size and gender and age. Then on top of that, we need to add our exercise energy expenditure, and then any sort of energy expenditure that we just get from, say, incidental exercise. And then we can throw in a little bit of around, the processing and digestion of our food, but we don't need to get too specific around that, okay? So we get our total energy requirements from that. Now, what happens when we're in low energy availability? Our intake and our expenditure are not matching. We need them to be in balance. And if we're in low energy availability, we're under consuming. And then we might start to see, if we're doing that over a long period of time, we then might start to see symptoms of REDS, which may include, and in women, we probably can identify it a little easier, because one of the things that we start to see is menstrual dysfunction. So our period might become a little bit irregular, might become lighter, or we might miss a period potentially. So this is after maybe a couple of months of this low energy availability.
Right.
We might get an upset gut. So we're feeling a bit more bloated. We're not digesting food as well. We might get cold extremities. So our hands and our feet feel colder. We might be getting injured more often. We might be getting sick more often. So there are, signs and symptoms that, might start to add up and go, okay, we're potentially under eating. Weight loss may or may not occur. Often, I'll have athletes say, but I'm not losing weight. It's like, well, it may not, because your body's trying to regulate itself and protect itself. So you may see weight loss, you may not. And then there are other symptoms, potentially cardiac symptoms, for the more severe low energy availability. You might start to get like an irregular heart rhythm potentially. There are, bone health issues. So one of the first things that we start to see switch off when we're in that low energy availability is healthy bone building. Now, that's not something that young women or that we're thinking of at this point in time.
No. Because
we're like, when I'm 80 and I'm osteoporotic, that I'm not thinking about that right now. But we're in our peak bone building years now.
Right.
Well, so when I say we, not me, I'm older than that, but up until the age of 25.
Okay.
So we need to lay down a really good foundation of bone health then.
Right. Interesting.
And if we're not getting enough nutrition in, which, that low energy availability feeds into bone building, we're not getting enough calcium or vitamin D, we might start to see, compromised bone health. And, we don't want to miss the boat. If we're not able to lay that bone down early, then that can be, pretty catastrophic later in life.
Yeah.
So there are lots of symptoms that come along with that, even cognitive function. So you might be a little bit more moody, maybe depressive symptoms, can't think clearly. So, we sort of go through, as a dietitian, I'd go through with the athlete like a checklist of things, like, are you experiencing these things? And obviously, like, I can sort of look at the nutrition in comparison to what their potential energy expenditure is and think, okay, there might be some low energy availability there. So in terms of prevalence, it's pretty hard to study. There was a study recently where around, I think, about 40% of athletes potentially are experiencing low energy availability, and men and women. So it's quite high. I suppose with REDS, it can be advertent, meaning we're trying to be in a deficit or that low energy availability on purpose, or inadvertent, which in the majority of cases where we don't mean to underconsume what we're doing. We don't realise how much we're expending. Our appetite has been suppressed because of the exercise that we're doing. You might find that when you do any high intensity training, for example, that your appetite is actually reduced and you don't feel like eating. You probably more want to vomit your guts up sometimes. Maybe it's food scarcity. Food is so expensive now. So can I get enough in because I can't actually purchase what I need to purchase? I don't have time. We're also time poor. How do I fit this into my busy life where I am at school or I'm at uni and I'm working and I'm training? So where do I logistically fit in all this food? So there are so many things that can then lead to that under eating. That won't necessarily be like a problematic, I'm doing that on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. It's even when you're just going through those list of things myself, I know when I was playing footy up in Darwin, where it was so hot and sweating so much, so probably needed more fuel than ever, but I just could not eat. I would just feel sick constantly. Yeah. And, I did have lots of soft tissue injuries and things like that. So you just think about times where I was like, I probably 100% would have been in reds and wasn't trying to be. I was trying to force food down because I knew how much I needed, but it's just so hard. And when you talk about time and things, in order to have a meal prepped week, you have to, almost lock in 4 hours to get that done. And sometimes you just don't have the time. It would be so good to have the money to have all these prepared foods for you. But realistically, it's challenging to hit the markers across your balanced diet.
Yeah, it's really tricky. And look, as a mum of two, I find it hard to fit it all in, and expensive and meal prepping. And I think we're so lucky now. There is so much great food available to us.
Yes.
And we expect all of our meals to be so gourmet.
Yeah.
And which I love. I love food, and I would love for my every meal to be gourmet.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not going to be. And I think sometimes we've just got to accept that we're not going to have a different lunch every day, and that maybe it's okay that we have a a basic lunch every day.
It doesn't need to be Instagram worthy.
It doesn't need to be Instagram
Sometimes
worthy.
a sandwich does the trick.
Sandwich, yes. Why does the sandwich, where has that gone? So I think sometimes we've just got to be okay with that. And that we don't have to do the Insta-worthy meal prepping.
Yes.
That, that you post and everyone's like, oh, that's amazing. Yeah. I think also too, we often go, oh, we need to be eating clean, and it's got to be full of great, produce that we're cooking from scratch. Again, in reality, that's not life. Yeah. And sometimes athletes need foods that you might not consider clean, that are full of sugar, and they are ultra processed. Yeah. But that's okay. Because again, if we come back to that 80-20 rule, there are times when we need to use those foods because that's what's better for us when we're trying to fuel a training session or within a training session. I've got cyclists on bikes who need to be eating 120 grams of carbohydrate per hour on a bike. How do you logistically carry all that food with you?
That's right.
So sometimes you need gels and you need lollies and you need sports drink, and that's okay because that's what they need to perform.
What are your thoughts then when people say, you should be getting carbs and proteins from whole sources as opposed to your protein shakes? Is there a difference?
Oh, look, if you're going to have a piece of lean meat, fish with veggies over a protein shake, then absolutely you're getting so much more nutrition from that than just a protein shake that's been processed. However, if you're finishing a training session and you're not getting home for 2 hours because you've got to drive somewhere or you're going straight to work or whatever that might look like, something's better than nothing. And having a protein shake in your bag that you can put some water into in your shaker might just be the best option that you've got at the time. So again, it's down to the individual, what they need, what their requirements are, and what works for them at that point in time.
Yeah.
Something's better than nothing.
Yeah. I think you're totally right there that we think it has to be perfect all the time, and it's probably better to be consistently good rather than occasionally great when it comes to nutrition. Yeah,
absolutely. Consistency is key. And again, not being so hard on yourself that you're not putting that perfect meal into your body every single time, because again, that's not reality. That's not how our life works now.
Yeah.
So what works for you right then and there, and what maybe takes that mental load off as well, that you're not always having to prep a perfect meal, and that maybe you're up and go, your banana and your muesli bar is okay.
So I'm interested now to talk a little bit more about why women need different fueling strategies than men. And I know that Dr. Stacey Sims is a big believer of that. She says that we are not small men, therefore we shouldn't train and fuel like men. So can you tell us why we need to fuel differently to men and sort of what that actually looks like from a practical standpoint?
Look, again, I suppose when it comes down to how we're fueling differently, we don't have, say, different carbohydrate recommendations or different protein recommendations or fat recommendations from a macronutrient perspective. It comes down to the individual. So, when I'm prescribing a nutrition plan for an athlete, I'm looking at what their body weight is, because I prescribe based on body weight. So if I just give an example, we might be looking at a carbohydrate requirement for maybe it's a team sport athlete and I want to do 5 grams of carbohydrate per kilo of body weight. Okay, so that's say if we've got a 60 kilo athlete, it's 5 times 60. So then we prescribe off that. Then we might look at their protein. Maybe that's 1.5 grams of protein per kilo. So I'm prescribing based on that person and their individual requirements. So it's not like, okay, you're a female, therefore I'm giving you more carbohydrate or less.
Right.
At this point, we don't have those specifics. Yeah. The science isn't there. And like I love Stacey Sim's work, but again, some of the things there we've just, as a practitioner, I prescribe to the individual and what their requirements are. And if it comes down to the menstrual cycle, and I sort of love that potentially that in the future there might be something around that to prescribe around the time of the month, but we haven't got that yet. But again, if we look at the individual and they're like, during my period, I'm starving or I'm not hungry or, I'm just craving more sugar. Cool. Yeah. Let's program that in for you. That's okay. So it's just, again, we look at what that person is doing, what their behaviors are throughout this, the menstrual cycle across the month. And we can be more prescriptive that way.
Right.
With that person.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So diving deeper then into the social constructs behind food, and I guess if it was just a science, it'd be quite easy, wouldn't it? And everyone would be very strict and, they could have a perfect diet, but there's a lot of other things that go into eating. It's emotional attachment, it's social, cultural, all of those elements. So I guess why then are women more prone to RED-S and low energy availability than men?
Look, so again, this would be another whole podcast on its own. But, there's an increased prevalence of disordered eating and eating disorders in the Australian population. And this is, again, male and female. But I think females, there's definitely a higher prevalence of that. We are, I would say, more in touch with our body. We're probably more prone to the pressures of things like body image. Therefore, we change our nutrition to account for that. I do think that there is greater media pressure, social media pressure, peer pressure, family pressure, whatever that might look like, on women to look a certain way. So we then therefore change the way we eat to account for that. And, that's really tricky. So I would say that that's one of the reasons that we probably see RED-S more so in females. Also, just from a physiological perspective, we probably see it more in females as well, because men, the RED-S needs to be more severe for us to start seeing those symptoms in males. Right. So it's probably more identified in females as well. And then also potentially it's the sports that we're participating in as well. So it's those aesthetically judged sports, things like gymnastics, that, or any of them really, that you, because you are in those sports, you therefore eat less because you are trying to look a certain way.
You're literally getting judged for how you look.
Exactly. I don't think, that comes down to the whole, uniforms that we're required to wear as well. And again, what that looks like. So there's a greater pressure to, again, look a certain way. But I think that's a huge driver of why we probably undereat. I think also too that we don't we underestimate what our requirements are.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really just don't think we maybe understand the amount of training that we do and how much fuel is actually required for that. We significantly underestimate that. Yeah. And then just throw in the body image element that we're then more fearful to eat more because of that.
Yeah. I was chatting to my friend the other day who she's training for a marathon, and she just says, I'm constantly hungry, I'm always eating. But then she said she was on about 1,800 calories a day, and she looked it up and was like, I sort of need to be on 3,000 calories a day. So in her experience, would it be beneficial from her going to 1,800 straight to 3,000, or is that when you'll find that weight will come on? Should you ease your way into that? What's sort of the best strategy for that sort of a situation?
I think you ease your way into it, because otherwise you're going to feel pretty sick. Yeah. So we need to train the body to tolerate more food. So we need to train the gut to learn how to, to take more food on, to utilize the carbohydrate that we're eating. So jumping straight from 1,800 calories to 3,000, you're probably going to feel just pretty sick in general. In terms of the weight gain, like that's going to be different for everybody and what that looks like. But again, we need to be making sure that we sort of fuel in a really systematic way that, when we are training for a marathon, for example, that it's not just about the 3,000 calories. It's, am I eating before I go out for my run? Am I having breakfast, lunch and dinner? Am I having a pre-run snack? Am I recovering from that as well and having a snack after that? Am I fueling during? So it's also about the regularity of eating, the timing of that eating, and then how much you're eating as well. So it's building all of that in. I don't know what your friend eats. Maybe she's not having breakfast and she's only having lunch and dinner, and that's where she gets most of her energy from in that day. Maybe we need to introduce breakfast in, or maybe she's not having a pre-run snack because it makes her feel sick. How can we modify that in a small way initially to help, that upcoming training session? How do we then fuel in the training session so that she's getting carbohydrate in there?
Right.
To support the outcomes of that training session.
Yes.
So, and that comes down, when we're looking at something like REDS, yes, there's the total energy in versus out, but we also need to make sure that we are making energy available for the training session that we're about to do. So if we, I work with rowers, for example, if they're going to go out in the water and row 20 kilometres in the morning, but not have breakfast because they're starting their session at 6 a.m., they're going into that session in low energy availability, which can therefore compromise the adaptation and the performance outcomes of that session, but also their health.
Right.
And if they're doing that repeatedly, then we can start to also see those symptoms of low energy availability.
That should have been another myth buster for you to bust, is should you train fasted?
No.
Good, because I hate it.
If you want performance outcomes, if you want good health outcomes, then training fasted is not the way to do it.
So that segues perfectly into the next section, which is all about game day fueling and a strategy behind it. So talk me through, for example, let's say I'm playing footy at Saturday at 10 a.m. What does my pre-game strategy, mid-game and post-game strategy look like? And let's say that on the morning of, I feel sick, I can't eat much. How do I get some fuel in?
Yep. So here we're going to look at different factors. So, could we get in a smoothie? So something that's liquid-based is going to digest a lot easier than something that's solid. So could we make a smoothie that's based on, say, milk, oats, banana, some honey and some berries? Is that going to digest well for you? Then great. If not, then let's find something that's even, a bit lighter. So that could be like white bread toast. So again, this is where we come back to those foods that we might not typically consider healthy. They're a bit more processed, but they digest really easy because they're low in fiber, but they're high in carbohydrate. Ideally, we want that last main meal to be 3 to 4 hours before you play.
Right.
Now, in some aspects, you've got people that are starting their race, game, whatever, at 8 a.m. You're not going to get them up at 4 a.m. to have breakfast. So then we've got to plan that a little bit differently. But if you're playing at 10, then you can probably eat your breakfast at 7. Okay, you could get something pretty decent in, something that you can tolerate and something that you're going to practice. So you're not just going to go, okay, I'm playing on Saturday. The dietitian told me to have a smoothie. I'm going to do that this Saturday. You're going to try all that in your training before you go and do that. You then want to have a snack about 60 to 90 minutes before you play, and that could be something light. It could be a banana. And then about half an hour before you play, you might have a small handful of lollies or some sports drink. So it's a nice little formula that we work in to your pre-game routine.
Right.
Okay. Then in-game, so again, or depending on how long that game, competition is and what you're looking at there, but let's just say it's footy. Okay, we want to have something every quarter. So a carbohydrate fuel or source every quarter. Again, it might be a cup of Powerade or Gatorade. I'm not sponsored here, by the way. A sports drink, let's say sports drink. Or it could be a gel, or again, it could be a handful of lollies or a banana. And you're doing that every quarter.
With electrolytes?
Doesn't have to be electrolytes. Like I think, electrolytes is a big thing. Like that's a whole nother topic. But if you're playing in winter, we don't tend to need And if we're not sweating a whole heap, we probably don't need the electrolytes. We get a lot of electrolytes from the food that we eat.
Right.
But if that makes you feel more comfortable, then that's fine. So then essentially you're going into that game with full energy stores, full glycogen stores, hopefully. Okay, so glycogen is the main fuel source of our muscles, and we need that to hit those high intensity efforts for us to kick the ball, for our brain to function. So then when we go in, we play a quarter and those energy stores come down a little bit. So then we top them back up again. And then we play another quarter, then we top them back up again. And so essentially what we're trying to do is just keep that fuel in the system so that we can access that immediately.
Right.
Then we finish playing. It might be lunchtime. So maybe you could just have lunch. So if you're going to eat lunch within the hour of you finishing, then great. Go and have a great lunch, whatever that might look like for you. Something that contains protein, some carbohydrate to replenish what you've just had or what you've just done. And maybe there could be some veggies or salad in there, ideally.
Yeah.
But if not, if you're not eating for a few hours, then maybe it's a flavored milk.
Right. And is there a window? Do you know how they always talk about this magic window? Tell us about that.
Look, they've sort of dispelled that 30-minute window. However, what I sort of like to sort of look at is that maybe it's a little bit of a habit for you that you finish a session, you recover from the session. Look, like I said, if you're not eating within the hour, I would prescribe a snack, have something there just to replenish those energy stores and start that recovery process. So, the sooner you get something in, the quicker you can start that recovery process. If you get the protein in, you can start to rebuild and repair those muscles. If you get the carbohydrate back in, you can start to replenish those carbohydrate stores ready for your next training session, which might be the next day, and getting some fluid back in as well. Right. So you want to rehydrate from the activity you've just done.
And then if you are a weekend warrior and do enjoy a bevy after a game, what are the effects that alcohol have on performance and recovery?
Look, alcohol's a toxin, so it is going to slow down the recovery process. Again, we're all human. So ideally, try and get that meal in first. Get the non-alcoholic beverages in first to rehydrate, and then do what you need to do from there. But just acknowledging that, alcohol is a toxin. It will slow the recovery process. It's not going to help with performance. But if you've got time to recover and you've got a few days before you then need to train next or compete next, then
be smart about it.
Be smart about it.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. And what role does caffeine have pre-game?
It's so helpful if you tolerate it well. So again, I think there are probably over-consumers of caffeine, and that can have negative impacts. So maybe it makes you feel too jittery, too nervous. It might exacerbate those sort of pre-game nerves, which then makes it worse to try and eat. But if you are consuming caffeine and you're doing it sort of in a way that's going to help your performance, then I think then absolutely use it. Whether that's through coffee or, look, I don't love energy drinks. Preference is to avoid something like that. But maybe it's like a caffeinated energy gel, or, there are, which, sort of more with our athletes that we use these caffeine strips that you can use, which is like a prescribed caffeine amount.
Right.
So, which makes it a little bit easier to judge, because coffee can vary so much in caffeine content.
Right.
So if we're wanting to be a bit more prescriptive around how much we need, they say it's maybe 3 to 6 milligrams of caffeine per kilo. And again, working with the right people, the dietitian preferably, to help you prescribe that. But yeah, if it's a coffee, I think we all know that caffeine can be helpful.
Yes, helpful in everyday situations.
Exactly.
But don't become reliant upon it.
Well, I'm reliant on it, so I'm not going to judge anybody that is.
I'm going to say, well, Dr. Emily said it's fine. Awesome. So in the work that you do now with the VIS and all your past positions that you've had, what are some of the common things that you see coming up with female athletes that you just would love to knock on the head from an early age?
It's the underfueling. I think I see it so often, and it's the underfueling, and not just being so aware of, I suppose, body and body image that they're not willing to eat, and the fear of their body changing. I think that for me, that's really sad, because I think when, particularly when you're young, you're still developing and growing. And if you're not providing the nutrition to the body that you need to help with that physical development, then how is that therefore impacting your health and your well-being? I think, getting the right amount of nutrition can help physically and psychologically. So I think there's a lot of things that we miss there. I think what we see a lot too, which I haven't really touched on yet, is iron deficiency. And we see that so often in female athletes. So again, this is really prevalent in the general population as well in females. So you might start to feel that you're more fatigued. Your perceived effort. So when you are actually training, you're like, oh, this would have normally been really easy for me, but I'm actually running out of puff sooner. You might have low immunity. You might be just feeling a little bit dizzy sometimes when you get up too quickly. So there are, those sort of typical sort of low iron symptoms that you might see. And again, it can be due to menstrual losses, but we're also seeing it because of that low energy availability. We're just not getting enough nutrition in. And young women tend to remove red meat from the diet, which is one of the most efficient sources of iron in the diet that we can get. So yes, you can get it through plants, but it's not absorbed as well. So you'd have to eat quite a lot more of those plants to get the amount of iron that you need. So I think that's something that, if you are experiencing those symptoms, you should see your GP, you should see a sports physician, get a blood test, find out if you are deficient, because then you can modify your diet or your nutrition to make sure you are getting enough nutrition, or maybe you need a supplement. Another thing that we sort of see is that when our athletes are iron deficient and they do take supplements, they get side effects with their supplements. Constipation being one of them, which is uncomfortable for everybody, but you can get an upset stomach and that sort of thing. So taking the supplement is, then they stop taking the supplement and then the iron continues to go down.
Right.
So, you need to continue to take that supplement. Ideally, you're taking that on an empty stomach first thing in the morning before you eat. That's not near coffee or tea.
Right.
Because the coffee and the tea reduce the absorption of the iron from that supplement.
Oh, interesting.
So, we need to be taking that supplement to get those levels back up. And we need to address the nutrition in the diet and making sure that you are getting iron-containing foods. Again, maybe it's a little bit harder because you choose not to eat meat, and that's okay. Or, from a cultural perspective, you don't include meat in your diet, and again, also okay. But we just need to make sure that we're addressing that to get the iron in. But we're seeing that commonly because of the under-eating.
Yeah. And I guess you've got your athletes who are vegetarians and vegans. So do they have to be extremely diligent in that regard as well? And is it possible to be performing at an extremely high level and still be a vegan?
Absolutely. But you just need to make sure that you are getting the right nutrition in.
Right.
So you need to make sure that you're getting the right amount of protein in, because protein in plant-based foods is lower. So you need to prescribe that, and make sure that that's across all of your meals. But then also you need to make sure that you're getting enough of those iron-containing foods. Is there something that you can add to that particular meal to enhance the absorption of the iron from that meal? So adding vitamin C, for example, to like a green smoothie, let's just for an example's sake, can help to absorb, help you absorb that non-heme iron from, say, spinach better.
Right. Okay.
But it needs to be carefully prescribed.
Yeah. And then there's a whole issue around, I guess, tracking calories, because it can lead to control issues and body image and things. But do you think it's a good idea to track calories for a while? More so not calories, but just seeing if you're getting enough protein, carbs, fats, and other sort of elements like iron, magnesium, etc.
Yes, look, I think it can be helpful. The thing with tracking your food intake, one, it's actually really hard to do well.
Yeah, it's time consuming.
It's time consuming. It's actually really boring. But you don't need to do it for a long period of time. You could do it over a week, and you can sort of see what you are doing.
Yeah.
I think it can be used well in an educational way to sort of go, oh, actually, I'm eating this much and I'm training this much. so it can help you to sort of gauge how much you do need.
Yeah, more of an audit.
And more of an audit.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't suggest that it's something that you need to be doing every single day for months on end, because that's when it becomes a bit more problematic and you become probably too obsessed with the data and too controlling over what you're doing. So we definitely use it in different ways, and it can be a really good educational tool. And then getting the right information around that. Something that I think most athletes also don't do is that they eat the same way every single day, regardless of what their training sessions look like. Yep. So you eat the same amount on a day when you're doing 2 training sessions versus 1 training session versus no training sessions. And your nutrition needs to fluctuate from day to day with your training.
Right.
You increase it up and down.
What about on recovery days?
You don't necessarily need to eat as much as what you do when you're training. Again, like, it becomes a bit tricky. There might be days when you have eaten less because you have been training and you haven't had the time to get that food in or whatever it might be. So then maybe on that recovery day, you do eat a little bit more to sort of bring that energy balance up over the week. Yeah. But yeah, if you're doing less, you need to sort of eat less. But keeping in mind that just by sitting here and even talking or watching Netflix, you're still burning energy and you still need to put fuel into the body for that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to keep that recovery process going.
Right. So if you were a young female athlete today, you don't know anything about nutrition, where to start, do you have some good like calculators or something so you know how much you should be consuming, and not just around, your day-to-day activities, but if I'm training 3 times a week, like, how do you know how much you should be getting?
I think calculators are a really tricky one. I would start just building your knowledge first, and there are great resources like the Australian Institute of Sport initiative, like the Female Health Performance Initiative modules. There's also some nutrition modules on there for, I think it's Nutrition HQ. Sports Dietitians Australia have some great resources. So it's building that base knowledge first. And then the thing is, I suppose in terms of calculators, we don't know how, like, I know we all have wearables, right? Like we all have Whoops and Auras and whatever, we have, or Garmin's, to sort of tell us, we're expending this many calories, therefore we must be eating this much. We need to be really wary that wearables are pretty inaccurate. So for us to be then calculating our energy needs and matching it to what that data says is actually really tricky.
Yeah.
We can use it in a way that, like, oh, look, today I expended a lot more than what I did yesterday, therefore I need to eat more. But I think, from a calculator perspective, there wouldn't be really something that I would suggest. Yes. If you're using sort of food and nutrient trackers, and there are many out there, they will generally give you, they'll work out what your resting metabolic rate is.
Right.
And then it will give you a physical activity level that you choose. So you might choose sedentary or light activity, and that will sort of give you a general gauge of what your overall energy needs are. But again, like I said, some of us, we're doing things quite differently every day. So that's going to be different every day. Again, I think from a nutrition perspective, and this is where, like, I suppose what I do in my job is that if you're in a sport like, you're running a marathon, your carbohydrate requirements are much higher. So you might be looking at sort of 7, 8, 9 grams of carbohydrate per kilo per day. Versus maybe you're in more of a skills-based sport where the energy expenditure is lower, and it might be more like 4 or 5 grams of carbohydrate per day. Right. You can sort of work out your requirements like that based on your body weight. But again, it's sort of taking, there are a number of elements to sort of take into consideration there.
Yeah, well, you even just prompt something for me is that if you're an athlete but you are a tradie as well, you're going to be expending a lot more energy doing that than what I do sitting at a desk all day. So you probably need to take that into consideration on top of everything else.
Exactly, yeah. And I think, physical jobs versus where you are sitting at a desk all day. So that will definitely change your energy expenditure. It is really tricky. There is no there are gold standard ways of measuring energy expenditure, but they're not available to us.
Yes.
They're available in labs.
Yes.
So it is really tricky to find that number.
Yeah.
But again, with the right information and the right help, you can sort of find a ballpark.
Yeah, a good place to start. Well, we'll definitely include some of those resources in the show notes so listeners can jump on and have a look at them. Wrapping up, knowing what you know now, what would you go back and tell your 16-year-old self?
That's a good one. Or I wish I didn't worry about my body so much because the body can do such amazing things. And, you know, again, not everyone's going to be in a position where, like, I look now and I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I grow 2 humans?
Yeah.
I think that is amazing. It's amazing what our bodies can do. And look what it can help us do, the sport that it can play, and just being appreciative of that. But I probably wouldn't have listened to that when I was 16. So I think just, trying to appreciate what your body can do for you and how strong we are, and, you know, fueling that strength too. Don't sort of take away from that. I think young athletes just, you know, if you're going to put all of this time and effort into playing your sport, then fuel it, because otherwise you're not getting the most out of it.
No, that's right. More weight on what your body can do and less weight on what it looks like.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, what is one thing on an individual level that we can all do today to promote and help grow women's sport?
It's the support and the funding that we can put into women's sport. I often see that the investment is lacking in female sport. So particularly in elite sport, the female, like the servicing's not there to support those athletes. It's always done on a tighter budget. And, you know, from a nutrition perspective, for example, you know, you might get a dietitian in, but it's only for a couple of hours. And, you know, in a female group of athletes, I feel like the nutrition support is so important there, but other aspects as well. It's sort of skimping on the servicing for females, but the investment into female sport, I think, is really important, because I want my kids to see more females on the world stage, on television, so that they know that they can do that. But the investment has to be there.
And I guess another thing too with REDs and issues like that, it's a multidisciplinary approach, right? Like, you need your dietitian, you need your psychologist, you need your physiotherapist. They all need to be across it. And if you're missing one of those services, then it could go undetected, or it could be elongated and not addressed necessarily.
Yeah, and I think every service provider, whether it is physio, sports physicians, trainers, whoever those or coaches working around our female athletes, need to be upskilled in that knowledge as well. So it's not just up to the dietitian or the doctor to identify that athlete might be underfueling. So don't just look out for, that athlete's lost a lot of weight, because they might not have. But if you're noticing other things, and, you know, there are great resources out there with people like the Butterfly Foundation or the National Eating Disorders Collaboration that provide free education to help us identify those sorts of issues. And then how we can then, you know, if we are identifying that in our female athletes, then how can we provide more information to them to maybe help them? Are they inadvertently underfueling, or maybe they're doing it on purpose? How can we put support around them to do that? And how can we refer to the right people? And that's on all of us. And that's on all of us to gain, or to put the time into getting more knowledge so that we can support them better. Because that dietitian won't always be there.
Yes.
But the physio might, or the trainer might, and they're noticing that, you know, when you're on the road and you're at the team bus or whatever, that they're always refusing food, or they're not eating, or they're feeling lightheaded, or, you know, there are changes in their body, whatever that might be, or they're not socializing, they're not going out and eating with the team. If we can identify that early, then we're more likely to be able to cut those practices off early and sort of bring those healthier eating practices back to normal sooner. Rather than sort of letting it get worse.
Yes.
So if we can all build our knowledge and identify that, then we can then refer to the right people and hopefully get those young people or those young athletes help sooner.
Yeah, 100%. And I think especially for young athletes, parents play a huge role in that as well, and upskilling their knowledge around nutrition and recovery and everything else as well.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to reach out. There are those helplines that you can call, and we'll put them in the show notes, that you can access, and they can help to refer you to the right people if you are worried about your young athlete.
Yeah.
Or whoever that athlete is around you.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Now, finally, at a more systemic level, what do you think needs to change to promote women's sport? And I'm specifically interested in the research behind women and how you think we can put more research and what levers need to be pulled to allow for more research specific to women with fueling, nutrition, training, etc.
The good thing is it's starting to happen, and there are research groups across different university institutions in Melbourne and around the world that are now dedicating more time into research for women, which is great. I think in the past, often the menstrual cycle was used as an excuse to not do research because it complicated the findings. It can make it more complicated, but shying away from that,
that's right,
I think is, you can't do that now. And look, the funding is going into that research, which is, it's getting there. It's getting better. It has been identified. And, there are conferences now that are just based on females in sport, which is awesome. And we're starting to see more and more research in that space from a performance perspective, from a health perspective, from, throughout the life cycle, from adolescence through to postpartum and menopause. So it's on the agenda, and we just, again, it comes down to funding, right?
Yeah.
So it's finding the opportunities to funnel that funding into the institutions so that they can do that. And also, again, we're so lucky now that there are so many opportunities for young researchers to be doing PhDs and honours and doing the research in institutions like the VIS do it really well. There are other institutions that do it so well having like a female research priority. Like at the VIS, we have research funding, and one of our priorities are female athletes.
Oh, that's awesome.
We encourage that research, and we encourage, we want to align with partners that are willing to do that research with us.
Mm-hmm. And if you're a young female who would love to be a sports dietitian, what's the best way to go about it?
So you need to, there's multiple ways. You need to do your undergraduate generally I did mine in exercise science, and then I went into a master's of nutrition and dietetics, and you can do that. Or you could do, Bachelor of Science or something like that. Yeah. You then work with the Sports Dietitians Australia, and they have a specialty sports nutrition course that you can do through there to become a sports dietitian. So, you need to go to university to do it, and it is a great pathway. We've got a great conference coming up, which I'll put a plug in for in November.
Please do.
So, and with, lots of, again, female health on the agenda on that conference lineup, which is very cool. Reds is also on there.
Awesome.
So with, some of the leading researchers in the world attending. So yeah, it's a great pathway. And, if you see a dietitian on Instagram, message them, private message them. I get so many messages through LinkedIn and Instagram just wanting to have a chat, to have a coffee. And most of us are willing to do that. If you want to know more, again, reach out to SDA. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Awesome.
And you can find out more around what that pathway looks like. And, you can become an associate member and access all of that information before you're even qualified.
Awesome. And what about the listeners? Where can they find you?
Oh, yeah. I'm on Instagram. I think it's mmean_dietitian. Sports dietitian.
We'll put that in the show notes
We'll
as well.
put it in the show notes. I'm not huge on Instagram, but yeah, you'll find me there. And on LinkedIn as well. I'm probably a bit more active on there.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Dr. Emily, thank you so much for your time today. And I have no doubt that the listeners are going to get such value out of this, because I learned plenty being here. And I think the key takeaway is that just how important fuel is, and how often we underestimate how much fuel we need to adequately live with the demands of day-to-day tasks on top of your performance needs and everything along those lines. So I look forward to the feedback on this one. Be sure to share it with a teammate, a coach, a parent, or anyone who needs to hear this. Subscribe, review, and tag us on socials at 4TG_podcast. I think this conversation will be a bit of a game changer that many people have been waiting for. So thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks for having me.